Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Santea. This is Thriving Thursdays with New York Theological Seminary, sponsored by the Lilly Foundation. Tonight's conversation is the diversity of divinity, LGBTQ, and faith. And we have some amazing speakers and conversation partners for you. We have Dr. Vanessa M. Brown, who is a licensed and ordained minister, currently serving as a senior pastor of Rivers of the Living Water Ministries, UCC, radically inclusive ministry located in Harlem and Newark, New Jersey. One of Dr. Brown's quotes here is ministry is at the forefront of her life, and her heart and her passion are in spreading the inclusive message of God's love for all. Our other conversation partner and speaker is Reverend Piwa Langini. Piwa is, so sorry. The ambassador for innovation and engagement in the Center for Analytics and Research and Development and Data of the United Church of Christ. He was also the founder of the Salis Center in Lansing, Michigan, which currently is still the only LGBTQ resource center in Lansing, Michigan. Piwa has a quote as well that is really important. Different doesn't have to be dangerous. I am really excited to have these two speakers tonight talking about this very important topic, the diversity of divinity and the inherent queerness of Christianity. So I want to just jump right in with you two. Thank you so much and welcome. Welcome, Dr. Brown. Welcome, Reverend Langini. So what does the diversity of divinity mean to you? And anybody can just start.
Yes, it's great to be with you both, and
Thank
all of
you.
you. Diversity of divinity, we could take it all the way to the beginning, Genesis, where we learn God creating the world and getting to the point of creating humans in God's own image. And the divine has imprinted God's image upon us. And so, us being all of humanity, all of creation. And so, this idea that the divine is diverse, is just a matter of looking around us, like the different hues, the different shapes and genders and different ways in which people show up, and even different species around us. To me, that speaks to kind of like the diversity of divinity. The idea like the breath, the divine breath, is in every single living thing,
Mm,
and that being, kind of like having the same DNA, the DNA of the divine.
awesome, awesome.
I love that, Reverend Piwa. And first of all, I'm so glad that to be here with you on today. And of course, Santea and NYTS, glad to be here as well. Diversity of divinity is like Reverend Piwa said, it's seen in creation. It's seen in the creation of time, right? In terms of, I think about flowers all the time. I think about the diversity of flowers that I see.
Mm,
I know that there's divinity in that because I know that God had to do that. When I think about a tulip and a hydrangea and a daisy and a rose and a lily, come on, and all of these different things that
yeah.
we see in nature, that makes me think about the diversity and divinity. But the other thing that makes me think about it is something that's very, right there before us. Janelle Monáe came out as gender non-binary.
Right.
That's diversity and divinity.
Yes.
Right there before us. Like, we don't have to go that far.
To look for it.
Right before us today, in the way that we see the world, this person is saying, I know what you saw before in me. I know who you all recognize me, but this is what I am now. It's a part of the evolution of who we are in creation as well. So I wanted to say that.
Awesome, awesome. I love that. I love that, especially the flowers. Just pointing out all the naturally diverse things in creation, and we're all of this great creation. Where do you see growth in these areas, and how can we get others involved? And particularly, I'm thinking about people that are outside the queer community. Like, how could they see themselves active in this?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been ordained, for over a decade now in the United Church of Christ, and I've actually primarily served, white congregations, usually
Mm,
older by at least 2 decades or so, and just just tend to be kind of smaller communities and whatnot. And one of my first things that I tend to do when I'm in the pulpit, I will, sometimes like the only black person in the room, I will say, "Hey, look at all the diversity around you." And 100% of the time that I've done that exercise, people laugh. And
mm,
I'm like, no, I'm being serious. Look
right.
all around you. And like, you can see the confusion in their faces, like, what do you mean? Right. And so I help them see that, there's not racial diversity in this room, but there is diversity. It's not one type of person. There's not
Right.
one type of career, not one type of family structure, not one type of, even belief system, even within one house of worship, right? And this idea that diversity is already at work here.
Mm.
It's not racial diversity, but y'all already know how to do diversity. And so I start there to kind of help them, like, again, like the idea that different isn't dangerous necessarily. It's like we have to unlearn the things that white supremacy has taught us as, normative, like the white being the default, which is just not true, right?
Right.
If you really take seriously about the diversity of divinity. But so trying to like meet people where they are, but stretch them just a tiny portion, a tiny bit at a time, in a way that still speaks to the urgency, because people are literally dying for us to not be able to grow and learn more about just how diverse the divine is. Um, and I'm not a boater, but I tend to use this boating image, if you're
Mm.
going in this direction and you shift your steering by like one tiny piece of a degree, the 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 difference isn't that much, right?
Right.
Today. But as we continue on this path, we end up in a very different location, right? So so
Mm.
so kind of starting, again, like these kind of like default normative communities to help them see that, wait, first of all, we are diverse. We can do diversity. We already know how to get along with people who are not like us. And then now ask them to stretch that beyond with, whether that's LGBTQ or racial diversity or abilities or all the other different kinds, of ways that, humans show up in the world.
Absolutely.
I think that you are right about that. To bring people together, and we talk about congregations or even in academic institutions, that's a great feat in and of itself, right? Because people are already coming, as Reverend Fiwa said, from their own social locations, in terms of and in their own identity when they show up, whatever
Right.
that is.
Right.
I mean, just like you did at your church, Reverend Fiwa, I can do the same thing, and then people might laugh in the same way, right? Because we have hung our hats a lot on talk about how multicultural something is, and but that's not really what the reality is, at least in my perspective. Like, I want
Mm.
it to be multicultural. I do have people from other cultures there, but it's not really all that multicultural, right? And so I think at the end of the day, I think it's just about showing people themselves,
Mm.
letting people see themselves, right? And then letting them also not just see themselves, but see other people, right? And when we recognize the divinity in other people, we can say, hey, this is what we need to do to reach out to this community, whatever community is that you want to reach out to. This is what we need to do. These are the facts and the tenets that we need to follow in order to pull this group of people in, right? You can't always bait people, right? So it has to be genuine and it has to be authentic. And I think that, if we move forward in that way, our congregations, our institutions can be what we need them to be. But I think it's about recognizing where people are and who people are.
Mm. Amen. What I heard from both of you with that particular question is that like diversity doesn't necessarily have to be queer, and I think that can be like a thread that like kind of binds everyone together in this idea. Um, all right, so many times in marginalized communities, right, we're the victims of systemic oppression. We also have to end up becoming educators of the people that hurt us. So, as members of faith community and the queer community, what is your response to this assumption, or how would you not, or would you or not advise the queer person of faith to answer this call to educate, this sort of responsibility of having to teach the person that's actually causing you harm?
You know, I don't feel, and I'm going to be honest,
Sure.
I don't feel like it's always our responsibility to teach about who we are. I think it's, if you want to know about me, I think it's your responsibility to learn
Mm.
about who I am. I think, and if you learn that's more intriguing for you to come and learn about who I am and then have a conversation with me.
Right.
And then I could say, you know what, this person is really interested in who I am and in my life, you know what I mean? And now I want to have a conversation with them about me. Now I really want to talk to them because they showed an interest in me. I think that us all the time having to say this is this. I think that people lean into it, but
Mm.
I think it's a both and. I think I teach, but I also think you learn. I think you go and you find out information, and you could come fact check that information. You could come ask me questions. You could come, I mean, some other people don't really feel that way. They feel like as soon as they get the information, as soon as they learn, as soon as they get the education, that's what they have to go out and do. And that's fine for people to feel like they have to go out and do it, but I watched that happen over and over and over again. I've talked to a lot of trans people my whole this in this journey, and like, it's not their responsibility to really teach you. It's your
Right.
responsibility to learn when we're in community. But okay, I'm gonna leave that alone.
No, thank you. Thank you. Reverend Piwa.
No, oof, I had to pause for a second. I feel that all the way down to my marrow, this idea that like it's dehumanizing at best.
Mm-hmm.
This need to always have to like educate folk like I'm some kind of like a specimen or a science project, or I'm in a zoo where people just come in and gaze at me or touch my
Mm-hmm.
hair, or just all these ways in which folk dehumanize, so they can't see me, they see my color, they see my queerness, they see, or when they choose not to, like, oh, I don't see color.
Yeah.
It's just as erasing, right, of just seeing my color, not seeing it, or just seeing my queerness. I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm all these things, but I'm also a creative, I'm also a parent, I'm also a human of a dog, I'm also a homeowner, so it's like I'm all of these things, and so when people can only ever just see slivers of aspects of who I am in my fullest, it actually is a quite dehumanizing act of them. And then being required to teach, I found that um, I've leaned into my alter ego, Petty LaBelle every now and then, and I try to like keep it to a minimum when I'm teaching and preaching. But this idea that it isn't my duty to teach someone. I mean, in
Right.
2022, in these United States of America, like there's no reason folk would need me to teach them some like one-on-one type of stuff, right? Now, if you want to know about me, like what Dr. Brown was saying, I am not Santea or
Right.
Dr. Brown or anyone else, right? So it's like I can tell you about me in a relationship, then we can learn about each other. But when people almost require for us to teach them about the blacks, the gays, the
Right.
trans, like it's an issue. And even like language too, I mean, I know I'm a bit of a wordsmith, sometimes, to the nth degree, but I'm trying to again bring that together. But this just even how we speak about, diversity when we talk about, the black community as though there's like one way to be black, or the queer community.
Mm-hmm.
I've started
That's
asking
good.
folk,
That's
"Hey,
so good.
tell me about the white community,"
Right.
and they laugh because it's absurd, right? Or
Yes.
tell me about the straight community. They're like, "Wait, what? Of course not." Then I'm like, "Then don't give that to us," So I
Right.
found again, like kind of petty, on the border of humor, is how I
It's
tend to like,
not really
start.
petty though, Reverend Fiwa. It's a pushback, and it's a good
Mm,
pushback, right? For people to recognize what they're doing and what they're saying. We lean into so many things
yeah,
that we've heard from other places and other things, thinking that this is the way to go. When in reality, a little pushback doesn't hurt to say, hey, listen, this is not the way we should be going, in terms of this direction. Like, there is another way that we can do this, and stop relying on. And I know there's a lot of organizations. Well, let's bring
Yeah.
Reverend Fiwa in. Let's bring Santea in. Let's bring Dr. Brown in. No, well, you know what? You all will do well to start asking the questions that need to be asked of
Yes.
us, and I'm gonna go as far as saying that, and if you want us to teach, we can't teach you for free.
Right.
Okay, I'm
that's
done with
key. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a big part too. Where it's like, I mean, I know when I was like kind of like new, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be, like, you can't pay people an exposure, right? So like being able to like show up with authenticity, but also with dignity, and again like in a humanizing fashion, and not just always in a dehumanizing one, where I'm reduced to these lessons that I can teach you in a palatable way, because then if we don't teach them in the right way, right, then it's on us. Like, oh well, that's why you don't have any allies. Like, so all the ways in which their own lack of doing their work becomes our burden, and that's just not the case. So for especially younger folk or LGBTQ folk and like black or people who are not white, essentially, I make sure I always leave space, to let them know, like, it isn't your duty to
Right.
teach people stuff, like it's your duty to know that you are free, that you are whole, that you are worthy, that you are divine, Now, whether or not the world knows that, that's a whole nother story, right? But you need to know it at your core. And there's something that happens in that knowing, right? Because now I found that, I mean, I'm in my 40s, and this is like a recent knowing, right? Like, not just I mean, I know it in my head, I can write it in a paper, but knowing it in my very blood has
Mm.
actually shifted how I show up in spaces, where I'm
Yeah.
not as apologetic, even when I, am I mean, I can be super petty, but I'm gonna come back to this recorded message. So if I get petty, I'm gonna say I was given permission to do so. But even then,
Yes.
what I'm saying? Like, we get to be petty, by all
Yes.
means, right? But like, just it's actually shaped how I show up, even in the educating moment, if that's what I choose, or if I don't choose to educate, it's just
Yes.
because I know at my deepest self, not just in a memorized sort of way, but like I know truly that this blood, this breath is
Right.
divine. And literally no one can take that from me. No
No.
one.
I
Oh,
just want to say really quickly, I
yes.
shared that with somebody the other day. I said, at the end of the day, people can take everything from you, but when you know who you are and whose you are,
Mm-hmm.
no one can take that away. Like there is my godfather used to talk about, and I didn't understand it when I was a kid. You got to know when you're knower. I used to be like, Dad, what is that? Who has a knower? He used to say, we all have a knower. There's
Mm.
something that's deep down. It's in the city of your soul. It's in the pit of your stomach. It's at the tip of your toes that you know what you know about you,
Mm.
right? And about the God in you, about the
Yes.
divinity in you. And so I don't waste a lot of time explaining about who I am. I don't anymore. I used to, there used to be a big fight when I was coming out, but it's not anymore. Like it's neither
Right.
here nor there. Like if you go, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to present myself as.
Right.
And then, hopefully you can receive that. And if not, then it's okay. Because I know that we do whatever we want to do whenever we get ready. And
Yes.
whatever we want to find to research, we in the world wide web of internet. We've been in COVID and a pandemic for 2 years. There's no reason for you not to know. But I'm
Yes.
gonna let that go too. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And this is, I think, like this is a natural segue. I like to think, right, being a queer person, a black person, a woman, that I'm like at an access, like I have all these multiple lenses in which to understand and interpret the world. And what I want to ask you is, what can the church or communities of faith learn from queer people? Like, what can we teach them? What can they learn from us? What can we show them?
Real talk, Christianity is inherently queer. So if folks say they're Christian, they have plenty to learn from queer folk, just I mean, just from the beginning to the very end, like back to Genesis, God makes humanity, male and female, not male or female, like
Right.
people want to like force us into these binaries, male and female. We are made in God's image, right? We can look throughout the text too, of all like the different, gender othered folk, both in their gender, but also even in their, their sex, right? There's not ever been 100%, binariness in the Bible, and I would even make the argument nowhere in nature does
Mm.
binary happen. The
Yeah.
only thing natural for binaries to exist is in our devices that humans have made. You know, it does not occur in nature,
Yes.
not at all, right? So those of us, who have had to transcend, whether that's like, kind of like binary, like hetero relationships, or like the binary around like transness, or the different queer, identities that we have present in our midst, um having to not just survive but to thrive, and then not
Hmm.
just to thrive but to do so in a faithful manner.
Yes.
um that's one of the most sacred things I've ever experienced, for myself, or witnessed in others, right? Is to be able to be queer and black and trans and still Christian in somehow,
Mm.
because the way Christianity is set up now, in a post Constantine world, it's not set up for us.
Right.
Right? And so that we are able to cut through all of that noise and still find God, like, that is a sacred and holy work, and so
Mm.
being able to like draw upon our stories without commodifying them,
Right.
without othering us, without dehumanizing us, really the church could learn a lot. People of faith could learn so much about what it means to be your whole self,
Mm.
even though I'm speaking to like, straight cis het folk, especially women folk, it's like there was a time where women were just, men's property, right? Where you had to like
Right.
keep the house clean and take care of the kids and this and that. And like tons of women, that didn't work for them, right?
Yeah.
And like queerness, right? Like that was queer to wear pants as a woman, to work outside the home. And so like, queer in the biggest sense of the word, like that which is not like, the norm, whatever that means. Um uh Jesus was a queering Jesus, what I'm saying? Like everything that was the norm, Jesus came around and queered it. He was queering all over the place. And so if we can take seriously, like this queer energy that is Christianity, that is, all of creation, I would even say, um the church would be in a very, very amazing place. I would even say better place than where we are now.
I think to add to that, and
Yes.
really it's not much to add, but the one thing I would add to it is also, when we come into a place as queer people, we come in all of who we are. At least let me speak for me. When I
Okay.
come into a place, I come in as all of who I am, but I also come with my ancestors.
Okay.
Right. And I think that recognizing our ancestors, like I think Christianity would do well to understand about indigenous faith. Right. So I'm not just Methabaptocostal. Right. I came from somewhere before I became all of those things. I came from somewhere and I have ancestors. I talk about my grandparents, my great grandparents, how I learned how to pray, who I am as a person. And I came from some place, before Christianity even existed,
Yes.
right? And so I like to say, and I've heard others say as well, if you went to an indigenous service and turned the volume down and went to a Pentecostal service and turned the volume down, you could not tell the difference,
Hmm.
right? You wouldn't know what was happening in that service because we're pretty much doing the same thing. And so I think that that's important in our queerness, that we also recognize our ancestors and where we've come from, right? That we reach back to move forward. And
Yes.
so I know that just even in my walk, I have brought the ancestors with me every step of the way, but even more so now in these last 2 or 3 years, that I pay respect to the ancestors. So I wanted to add that.
Yes. 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 The ancestors. Wow. Okay. So this is gonna ask a little Bible question here. So we know the Bible, that's our instructive text for Christians, and the Bible also has been used to hurt queer communities, hurt others in general, right? Do we still need the Bible, right? Is there still a message of hope in it, particularly for the queer community? Do
You
we
ain't
need
gonna get
this?
me in trouble, okay? I told you it took me 10 years to get into United Church of Christ. Look at this question now.
I mean, I want to know.
Because they're gonna say, now, did y'all hear Reverend Dr. Brown? Okay, I'm gonna let Reverend Fewell go first.
Yeah.
Like real talk, I already said, if this is what's gonna get me booted, I am loyal to the work. And for what I almost was hearing you say too, Dr. Brown, with your previous answer, that I think kind of ties into this one, is there's also not just paying attention to queerness, right? But like there's like some intentionality to like divorcing Christianity from white supremacy and
Yes.
colonization, right? That gets us back to like our most natural sense of being, right? Before we were violenced against and forced to embrace this like blonde Jesus that I'm not sure where he came from, but um and so I think in a similar way, right, being able to reread this text, that again, I mean, has humanity sprinkled throughout it. I jokingly say to folk, like the heavens did not open, and then this Bible, the King James Version Bible, did not come down from the heavens in a Ziploc baggie, right? That this was our humans participated in the making of this text, so both in what goes in it, how it was translated, what stories were carried forward, even in your own lifetime, like you in your families and whatever the makeup, right? Like you can tell shared stories. Like you don't tell every single detail, right? But every time you tell it, you some details kind of get embellished and get carried forward, so even the stories that were chosen to be shared and passed along in those oral traditions, right, have a human element.
Yeah.
And to me, that humanity, again, coming back to, if we are truly the divine in our image, right, or we are the image of the divine, then the humanness of the sacred text doesn't make it less divine. In fact, I think it makes it more so. And so finding humanity in the text, both the flaws but also the beautiful transformative moments,
Yeah.
then makes room for my flaws and my transformative moments, right? And so I think the Bible, I mean, again, it's one that I inherited, you know, that's I was born and raised as a Christian, different denomination, but so it is one that continues to be instructive for me, but I love finding new life in it, right? It becomes a living
Mm.
text when I bring my whole self to it, you know,
Yes.
not as I once thought as a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or 8-year-old, you know, whatever age, like at this age, with these identities that I've come to know and this progressive revelation that God has given me, that I can come to it with my full self, including my queerness and my blackness and my all the other things, right? And being able to encounter God in the midst of these human tellings of their
Mm.
explanations of an unexplainable divine, you know. And I believe that it's not just the Bible too. Like there are many sacred texts, you know,
Yes.
a lot of poets and artists, even in our current day, who point me directly to the divine in ways that the Bible has never and can never, you know. And so I think, you know, the Bible, yes, and also, right, and being
Right.
able to like have kind of a mature approach to it and a relationship with it that allows us to see God. And if we're only just seeing what we believe in, then there's a you know, a syntax error, you know. It's got to move me beyond what I believe and what I know to be true, but you know, stretching me toward the divine in a more
Yes.
loving and open manner.
That's very powerful.
Very.
You know, we used to sing a song coming up, and the song was, "The Bible is right, somebody's wrong. The Bible is right, somebody's wrong. The Bible is right, somebody's wrong. The Bible is right." And we go on and on and on for like 10 minutes that the Bible was right and somebody was wrong. What I feel about the Bible is that the Bible are words about God by man,
Mm.
okay? And that they are some inspirational things in the Bible that lift us up, right? And move us in our consciousness and in our spirit. I also feel that there are things in the Bible that torment us,
Yes.
right? And bring terror,
Yes.
right? Uh, but so to so that I can say this and not offend anyone, I do believe, like the United Church of Christ says, that God is still speaking, that it did not end with the closing of Revelation, right? That there is, and I do believe that another canon should be written, and it should have the voices of someone like Reverend Fiwa, of
Mm.
someone like Bishop Flunder, of someone like William Barber, of someone, you know, like Michael Beckwith, of Carlton Pearson, and the list could go on and on and on about the people that I feel should be in the next canon. You know, the letters from a Birmingham jail ought to go inside the next canon. These are things that I believe, right? For those that love the Bible and worship the Bible, that's not me. I don't idolize the Bible. I don't worship the Bible. There used to be a time, you couldn't do nothing. You hold it. You'd be so nervous when you held the Bible, just walking from one room to the next. Like, I don't feel that way about it. I do believe that there are sacred texts there, right? Just like in the Quran, just like in the Talmud, so many different things that we can find. So I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I would certainly say that a good biblical exegesis of the text is
Mm.
necessary in the days and times that we live in. That's what I'll say.
All right. All
Yeah.
right. Wow.
That won't get me kicked out.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
No, but you know, and even like just yeah, I there's so much more, right? I mean, this Bible, it's like it has literally become a weapon. Like people have
Yeah.
died because of this Bible,
Mm-hmm.
or the ways in which, right, it's been wielded as a weapon, you know. And because ultimately the Bible doesn't do anything. It doesn't say anything. It's literally ink on a paper,
Mm-hmm.
It's an inanimate object, right? Again, it becomes alive when we come to it and engage with it, faithfully, responsibly, and whatnot. And one of my favorite exercises nowadays, again, is like, being able to go through it and start finding queer themes throughout it,
Mm.
I even had done a thesis not too long ago around, like just gender ambiguity in the Bible. When you look at
Wow.
characters like Jacob, who literally had to put on masculinity to do this work that he was doing, or Esther, who put on her femininity, or Joseph, who is a gender other, right? Or if you look at Matthew 19, talking about, becoming eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom, like, what does that mean? And I think
Right.
there's so much informative that, again, with our modern understandings of what queerness is, which I don't believe existed back then, but being able to like use these lenses, right? And then extract from the world as much as we can, discover and uncover of what was going on then. It's like in those contexts, right? Being able to be faithful, kind of like excavating culture and context and meaning. And that to me is like that delicious moment where like a faithful relationship with the Bible can happen. And then again, being discerning too. There's some
Yes.
things that we probably don't need to, like dashing babies against rocks. We could probably leave that behind. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like we don't need that. And there's a lot, and it's a surprise that we let kids read the Bible, because it's really not
It's
a text for
that's so
children.
good. That's
Good.
so
you know
good because the bottom line is that if we are biblical literalists, we're in
Mm.
trouble.
Right.
We're in trouble, right? If you're biblical, we're all in trouble if we become biblical literalists. The very thing that he said, throwing a baby against the rock, that's not something we're gonna do. We're
Right.
not gonna stone people in the middle of the street. Come on here. You know what I mean? We're just not gonna be doing certain things that the Bible talks about, particularly in the Old Testament, right? I think that we have to come, we talk about come, let's reason together. And so part of it is us reasoning together about, and then coming around the table, using good wordsmithing as
Mm-hmm.
well as trying to queer the text, so that we can get an understanding of who we are today, because that's what it's really all about. The Bible tells a story of 2,000-3,000 years ago, right?
Right.
But that's a story for then. But how can we make that story applicable for today? That is what our young people want to hear, right? How can you compare that to, Little Nas? Where is he at in the text?
Right.
You know, whoever the artists are that we're listening to, and that our children are listening to, our teenagers are listening to, our millennials and Gen Z, we can find it. It's there. It's just about doing the work.
I have to tell you, you
Wow.
bring up Lil Nas, like him on a poll somewhere, and how like a whole bunch of Christians were so in their feelings about that, boycotting Lil Nas, and they completely missed, right, that this was an interrogation of the church, and
Mm.
the ways in which the church still is so like, you can almost smell the staleness
Mm.
of the theology that church, cultural church, at least, this kind of white supremacist church, the church that a lot of our people are leaving by
Mm-hmm.
droves. They're not leaving God, they're leaving this iteration of church, this iteration of theology, right? Because God is I mean, like as fresh as a field of lilies, right? But like
Right.
the church, the representation of God supposedly is smells staler than like books that are become mildewy,
Mm.
and literally to the point where um the power, and I get chills and I'm in tears, even just what Lil Nas did with that video, and what a tender and vulnerable moment that he shared with us that made room for the rest of us who are still healing, ordained and in the church, and there's still things about me
Yes.
that got healed having watched that, creative
Yes.
interpretation
Yes.
of embracing the divine within him, um
Absolutely.
in a way that it doesn't have to be church ready,
Yeah.
because there's a lot
He
that wasn't church ready about
yeah.
God and Jesus, right?
Absolutely. He was actually trying to also show us what the church has done,
Mm.
the condemnation, the judgment, right? So he was looking. This video was from several sides. He didn't just take one side. He was, everything that Reverend Fiwa said, but of course everything that I just named as well. He was naming it, right?
Mm.
He was naming it, and we got mad because he was naming it. He was calling the universal church out on
Mm.
the carpet for how he had been treated, but how he know others had been treated, right? This kid loves God. You can make no mistake about it. You can't make me think or believe that he doesn't love God. It's just not in the way that you want him to love him.
Right. Wow. Wow, that is powerful. Um, so this moment, this time right here that we have together, I would call it a brave space. And it makes me think about the question of allies. And I know sometimes people think they want to be your ally or they think they are an ally, but to you, I'm asking, um, how can allies play? How can they participate? And I guess what ideas or what advice would you give people seeking to create these brave spaces, affirming, inclusive spaces for LGBTQ people?
You know, somebody just really quickly, I watched, there's a Presbyterian church who has a diversity and inclusion person. And
Mm,
a diversity and inclusion person, I believe it's either trans or gender non-binary. I'm not sure which one, but they were the spokesperson for the church. I thought that was a great idea. As an ambassador, to say this is what we are, this is who we represent. Like your welcome, what I'm trying to say basically has to be loud.
right.
You got to proclaim your welcome to us because of the damage, because of the
Yes.
loudness of your hypocrisy, right? Because of the loudness of your condemnation. Well,
Hmm.
your welcome has to be just as loud or louder than what was done before that, right?
Yes.
Any information about LGBTQI issues, LGBTQI people, queer people, that needs to be up in forefront. You know what I mean? When you talking about what's happening in the world, like that needs to come up. Like we don't need to be a byproduct. Oh,
Right.
so as a matter of fact, and also no, we need to be also at the top of the news, like everything else. Um, inclusive language, but that I can go on and on and on about that, right? Because I came from a church that didn't use it, so it was hard. So even when I'm singing songs that I love, I have to
Yes.
remember, that I need to try my best to use inclusive language, you know um and I mean, I have a list in my brain, or at least I had one, but you know something that Reverend Fiwa said earlier, like there's diversity in families. All families are not the same.
Right.
They're not, the makeup is not the same. So acknowledge that. I acknowledge that there might be, whatever, because I don't
Yes.
want to get into the diversity in families. It's not just mother, father,
Yeah.
son and daughter, right? It's something else, right? And we need to name that something else. Like a lot of times we use this all are welcome. What does that really mean?
Right.
Who's the all? Are we really, I mean, I could get into, I know families that are polyamorous, you know what I mean? And it's the, it's the husband, it's the wife, it's his, cause somebody gonna be mad at me, but it's his partner and it's her partner and it's their kids. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a real family.
Yes.
They doing better than some of the heterosexual couples. Come on, right? But I don't want to get into that because that's not what
Right.
this conversation is. What I'm just saying is that the welcome needs to be loud. It needs to be bold. The other thing is that we need to avoid assumptions. If you
Yes.
don't know, ask the question.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's very important. Just ask the question, and the person can feel free to say whatever it is that they want their response to be. But I think it's that the steps have to be intentional,
Okay.
right? When we're trying to have these brave spaces. And yeah, people gonna mess up in these brave spaces.
Yes.
I'm messed up in my own brave space. You
Me
understand?
too.
But I have a chance to correct myself and to get things right, right? And to show that I'm making an effort in trying to make it right and not get an attitude
Right.
because somebody corrects me.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, maybe it's the decade I spent in St. Louis, where it's like, I'm gonna need you to show me, homie. Like, people will tell me all day long, but then their welcome does not mimic the words that they just told me about welcome, right? So it's like,
Mm,
this idea that like, even even the idea, right, of like brave spaces, right? Like, yes, I think being brave enough to like risk, the vulnerability of being wrong or like, making a mistake or like feeling like you've made yourself a fool, whatever else, right? But to me, a real ally is someone who can commit to making the world, the space, the church, the fill in the blank, a place where I don't have to be brave just because I decided to breathe and show up. Say that again, right? So
Right.
when I show up and someone's like, "Oh, you're queer, you're black, you're a pastor. Oh, you're so brave." No, no, that's not a compliment. Like, make
Right.
this world a place where I don't have to be brave because I
Right.
dared to have breath in my body. That I
Yeah.
dared to not hide myself under a bushel. No, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that to me is like a true ally, not someone who's
Mm.
gonna do the work because I'm in the room. Like when people ask people's pronouns because I'm there, but they
Right.
don't ask those pronouns when I'm not there, you're actually making where it's like, now I'm othered, right? Now I'm
Yes.
the, you continue to, I guess, perpetuate that harm against me. So you're not actually welcoming if that
Mm.
happens, or this idea that, oh, I'm old, you've always, whatever. People know how to do pronouns. And here's one quick test you can find out. Call God a she. Call God a she. And people will be really quick to help you
Listen,
remember
those
why
Right.
your
might be
pronouns
fighting
matter.
words. That's
You
right.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
Yes.
so
I know
again,
about
then
it.
if I am saying that my pronouns are they,
Hmm.
and to call me something that's not they, then you are quite literally then doing violence to the divine in the same way that you think I am by calling God a she, which by the way,
Yes,
Absolutely.
God is transcends gender, but that's a whole
that's
nother
right.
story too, right?
Right.
So really then truly, so people who are conditional allies, I'm not interested.
Mm.
And I used to carry cookies around at first, like, okay, let me just encourage them because they're helping. Look, the cookies done crumbled, I ran out. Like, if you are doing it for a reward, then you're
Right.
not actually an ally, right? You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
if you
Right.
are doing the work, even when I'm not there, that to me is a mark of a true ally. Whether or not anyone else sees it, that's an ally, or advocate, or just whatever words you want to use. But like the idea that this allyship has become so diluted and watered
Hmm.
down, like most things that get co-opted by whiteness, right?
Hmm.
Um, like dances and lingo. Anyway, let me stop. But people put on their ally hats and they will be so quick to be white and straight again as soon as anything starts to get stirred up. Like, oh,
Wow.
let
That's
me
right.
hide
And
my
I've
ally
watched that.
hat.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
powerful. Mm. Well, okay. That is wow. Call God she. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. Um, this has been a really, really, really great conversation, and we're drawing toward the end. But I wanted to know if either of you just had, particularly, I'm so interested in this piece about this Salas Center that you started in Lansing. Like, what was that? What was that like? And now to this day, you said it's still the only one. Like, what? How did you even have I'll just say I feel the courage to even do something like that.
Well, just can you just, I hear your question, but can I just say, can you tell us exactly what the center is? Because
Yes.
I've got people who are asking me, and I say, I don't have any idea. I want you to tell us.
Yeah. So I'll do a really quick-ish story leading up to it. So I'd moved to Lansing, moved back in with my parents for what was supposed to be a temporary stay. Um and so I'd not been in Lansing for like 15 plus years. So like when I left, I was a baby queer. When I came back, I came back as trans, what I'm saying? Like I had like different kind of medically transitioning, operations and hormones and etc. So I was not the same me when I came back. So I left a young baby queer, still trying to figure out if Seventh Day Adventism was for me, and I came back as a UCC person who's queer and trans, right? And so, while I was there, I actually had like sent my profile out to like 70 churches across the nation, UCC
Mm.
churches. I got 3 interviews and 0 calls. And for the people, there's some coded ways, and some people who actually explicitly said the fact that I am black and I'm queer and I'm trans were like a few too many identities that the church wasn't quite ready to have in
Mm.
place, right? And so, after some of those no's, there's some people who are like, why are you not just doing your own thing? I'm like, come on, like it's just me, it's fine, whatever, I'll do something else. But the call came from 5 separate people, not related, who were like, look, actually the fifth one was a new doctor I just met, literally looking in my ear, talking about, why don't you just start your own community here? And I like started laughing that holy laugh of like, all right, God, this is the neon sign. I see it, right? But he said all the trans patients that he treats, he is certain that their health would be better, their physical health would be better if they had a place to deal with their spiritual health.
Mm.
And that's when I started crying. I've never been seen in such a manner from like a doctor, right? Because usually that's another layer of having to educate
Yeah.
about, having learning quickly how to be an advocate for your own care and whatnot, so that's kind of the space that began. So I created
Mm.
Salus Center. Salus, the word, is a Latin word, which stands for wellness and wholeness and well-being. It's also the root word of salvation,
Mm.
just without that cultural baggage. So I picked Salus so that we can, as a community, decide what is wholeness, what is well-being for us. Um, and it is the first place
Wow.
that I've ever been able to be all of my parts, black and queer and trans and Christian, not just Christian, but clergy, right? Because if I want to be in Christian spaces and be black, I can't be queer. If I want to be
Mm.
queer and Christian, I can't be black, right? And when I'm around my queer folk, I can be blackety black, black, but having Reverend in front of my name was actually the biggest barrier of my work at Salas Center.
Wow.
And that's not an accusation of the people that we were serving. That's a call for the church. Church, this is a problem. It is a deadly problem that having Reverend in front of my name was actually a barrier to do work in LGBTQ spaces. And so, yeah, so the Salas Center, I originally thought it was going to be like a church that had a community center, but I quickly learned that I had to be a community center that had a worshiping community within it.
Mm.
And it's not the same thing, but we can get into more details at another time. But so essentially, I having black women who like quite literally birthed me and brought me to this moment. I learned even with my own black mother and my black daughter and my sisters and siblings, who have taught me the art of survival. I started an organization with nothing. Was not a fundraiser. I wasn't like all these things that I became, were things I had never done before. But it was literally motivated by the belief that I know that God wants us to be whole, and so I created a
Yes.
space where I could be whole. And in
Yes.
so doing, there were other people who got to bring all their pieces and begin to putting them together and being whole people. And in that time too, I kind of encountered the word integrity, right? We talk about, oh, we have to have integrity. We usually mean like,
Mhm.
be upstanding, whatever else. But that word actually is related to the word integrate.
Mm.
And if I am not an integrated self, I cannot operate from integrity.
Right.
So if I'm like a clergy person with a secret life, I am not operating out of integrity. Not because, I'm gay, but the people don't know it. But it's because I am not a whole self. If you cannot be whole, if you cannot be all the pieces that you are so that you don't have to sneak around, you don't have to lie and all the other stuff, right? You cannot operate out of integrity if you are not an integrated self. And so that became my
Mm.
purpose, is
Wow.
bringing people's pieces together, even if this is the one place they can do it for now, until they remember how it feels, that it begins to happen outside of the walls of the Sala Center. And that was, essentially what I was trying to get to. And I was there for 3 years, and I resigned pretty quickly, just because I realized, my gifts are that of like planting and like kind of initiating and catalyzing, but
Yes.
not building. And so I'm a Leo, so I have to pray about, like my tendency to feed my gigantic ego. And um I'm grateful, I was able to leave. I always be the founder, but like my leaving has actually allowed them to like build in ways that I couldn't even have done on my own. So it has become truly a community space, not the Piwa show, Piwa and the Salad Center, but it really was about Salad Center being like an important part of the community. And I'm grateful for, again, the many I've seen having to do it out of necessity and survival, but
Mm.
like now being able to do it kind of in a place of thriving and healing.
Wow. That is beautiful. It's awesome. Um, Dr. Brown, any closing or centering thoughts you'd like to share with us this evening?
I just want to say how incredible that is, Reverend Fiwa, of you. And again, if you're a planter, then you can do it again.
Yeah.
It's just that
Yeah.
simple, and it'll be in other places at other times, because that's what the apostles did. They planted churches. And so, I would just say, just go forth and do it. Find the places where they're needed, where they're necessary, and then help cultivate and do what you do. So I wanted to say that.
I receive
There
that.
are really no last words. I mean, this is a continuing conversation,
Yes.
right? You'll get another group of people who'll be bright, who'll be brilliant, and who'll have information to give. I think that information is power. We empower one another by what we say, by what we do, by how we live, right? And at the end of the day, even the words that we say, if they're not lived out, they mean nothing. And
Yes.
so I would encourage us to live out loud, live out boldly, live out courageously. We're going to do it anyway.
Yes.
right? Not gonna let anybody, turn us on and off, or, give us permission to be.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for permission to be, right? People are looking for permission to be. I get it. I'm not looking for permission to be. I am. And
Yes.
so I'm gonna come in all of the strength of who I am. Then I say thank you to you all tonight.
Thank you both. Thank you both. So this is Thriving Thursdays with New York Theological Seminary. We have Dr. Brown, Reverend Piwa. Thank you so much. I feel full. I hope you all feel full. Have an amazing night.
Thank you all.